All right, everyone, welcome back to the Vibe and Flow podcast. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with Leona Schrock today. She is a life coach for women who are wanting to deepen their relationship with femininity and God. And I'm so pumped to have this conversation. We've been talking for a while now, and I feel like the energy is just off the roof with you, Leona. Thank you so much for being here. Share with us again what is lit up in your sphere right now. What are you excited about right now?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for bringing me on here. I am honored to be here and to just, speak on your podcast. And yes, we have had great conversations prior. We probably should have been hitting record before we were just going back and forth so beautifully. Just we flow. I love it. Anyways, what lights my soul up is these conversations of what really is lighting my soul up currently is helping women open their heart up to receive what God has for them. Because I know, like for myself, I lived my most of my life in the hyper masculine, in the hyper independence. I had all the walls around me. I was doing all the mindset work. I was going to church. I was reading the scriptures. I was quote unquote renewing my mind, but I felt blocked. I was like, what is stopping? What is like, why? This God has got to have more for me. Like this is not enough. And I was even told, be content with what you have and all the things. And when then I discovered like healing your nervous system, and I prayed the prayer of what is the Proverbs 31 woman, and the whole world of like femininity opened up. And that is when I began to really heal my nervous system, drop into my heart, and began to see all the ways that I was stopping what God has for me. And just like my relationships and my whole life began to transform. And when I see this for other women, or I see women like walking in their masculinity or in their head all the time, what lights me up is when I get to work with women and they get to drop the doing and they get to start being, and they begin to receive what God has for them, and they just begin to flourish and be the woman that God has created them to be. That's what's lighting up my world.
Yes. Oh my goodness, we are so on the same page about that. I love it. You mentioned about like the transition from constant doing to learning how to be. What was that like for you? What was the
Ah,
Leona before all of this, and what's the Leona now like?
the Leona before this, oh my word. Okay, that is such a great question. Going back, I was so like I was strong and I was independent and I like felt so empowered coming from that state too. Like I got this and I don't need anybody, which fun little fact, I proved myself of not needing anybody either. Because at the end of the day, when it was really hard, I was like, well, yeah, see, nobody's in my corner, anybody. Anyways, nobody has my back. Here I am by myself, got to do this by myself, which, hello. I was creating that for my own, like I was literally just proving to myself my belief about it. And so I was working like 15 jobs a week. I was going nonstop. And it was like I was emotionally unavailable too. Like I was not connected to my heart at all. It was just like a checklist of things. With my kids, I desired so badly to be present with them, to connect with them, but I always felt like a disconnect with them. And even like the people around me, I would only let them get so close and then I would push back subconsciously, wasn't even consciously aware of it. And everybody thought I had my shit together. Like, and I always kept being like, why do you guys feel like, do you not see? But I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I only knew how to show up a certain way and do certain things and perform a certain way because underneath there was a little girl on the inside of me that was scared to death people would find out I'm not perfect. I wasn't aware of it, obviously, but so I was, had the perfectionism, the performance, and all of those things. So when I began to heal my nervous system, wow, that was a process. Like I told you prior, like I couldn't even sit to watch a movie and my whole nervous system would twitch. And I would be like, oh, I got to get up and I got to do the dishes. I got to bake something. I got to see if my kids are okay. And I like had to reparent myself and like be like, it's actually safe for you to sit down. It's safe for you to enjoy a movie. It's safe for you to go for a walk. The world is not going to fall apart. You are not called to be anybody's hero. God did not create you to be a robot. And so coming home to my heart, I can actually see why people resist it because it's, we always say kingdom is backwards. And it's like, flipping your whole world upside down and being like everything that you thought was is no longer and now doing opposite because it's not about what you're doing, it's about who you're being. Who did God create you to be? And I remember somebody asked me, who are you? And tell me that without saying what you do. And I was like, a mom, and they're like, no, no, don't describe yourself. And I'm like, um I don't really know what to tell you because I was disconnected from my heart. So now it's the beauty of, and I'm still on this journey, but just the transformation that I've seen of me connecting with my children, connecting in my friendships, and the way that I do business. I was also trying to grow my coaching business by doing all the things, And while, yes, we can have structure, but we are our business. We are the pillar. And if we're trying to do it like men do it, we crash and burn. I like ended myself up in the ER room because my cortisol levels were over the roof and I was trying to do all the things and my health is just couldn't anymore. It's like my adrenal glands, my thyroid, everything crashed. And so now living from this place of where allowing my heart to be open to receive what God has for me and to actually be connected to the people that I'm doing life with and to allow and receive like the opportunities. You know how we pray for opportunities to come into our life too. I was like, well, I want to give this to you, but you're like your energy and your heart is shut down and you're resisting everything that I have for you. So it's such a beautiful world. Yeah, that's where we're at now.
So good. I mean, that piece of like allowing in what we desire. And just, when I realized that, okay, we receive and get what we feel safe to receive. It's like you it's not something that is being taught in a way because what the world shows us is that you just grind and grind and that's how you get, right? That's how you get what you want. But how important the piece of coming home to yourself, healing these parts of yourself so that you can actually have the capacity to receive what you want is what's missing. So, so big. I want to hear more about your story. Like I know some of the pieces that you shared previously. Your walk from religion, your story of coming into a relationship with God as a feminine woman. What does that look like? And what was the previous paradigm that you lived in?
So for me, the religion that I came from was Amish, which I'll give like a few little chunks there because a lot of people like they know of Amish but don't really know. Amish is they are, I like to say this, they're human just like everybody else. Because sometimes everybody's like, oh, the Amish are incredible. And I'm like, they're human just like we all are, okay? And they are, the religion there is very fear-based. It's not motivated out of faith. Now, it is slowly transitioning. They're slowly becoming more open. But when I left the Amish religion, I was motivated to love God and to know Jesus out of fear. It wasn't because that was the desire of my heart. And I felt like, oh my gosh, my life has transformed because I received Jesus. And so we had a lot of rules that we had to follow. Like there's a certain way that you have to dress, there's a certain way that you have to live, and you can only do certain things in order to be accepted and received as you are, which was very performance, a lot of very image, like what you look like, how you dress, what you have, and what you do. And so it wasn't like, oh, I have this dream or I have this vision or I have this desire for my life. And they're going to be telling you, yes, go for it if you feel like that's where God's leading you. It's more like, well, make sure you're in the will of God. And, your place is to be at home, which, I mean, honestly, I love being at home with my children. So no shame with that. But it was just like, be at home and be the homemaker and do certain things, and the wife is basically to be seen and not heard, which I never felt like I really captured that mindset. However, in my healing I discovered that because of like your generations, the things that you carry, from your mother to yourself, that I did kind of pick up that whole belief system of my voice doesn't really matter because I'm a woman. And so for me to, I left at the time, I left that because I discovered that what I went into the Bible and I realized that what they're teaching and what the Bible says is like two different things. But I see this when you leave religion, you can leave it physically. It doesn't mean you've left it mentally and emotionally. And
Yeah.
there's like this whole detox process that you got to go through. And because there's like a whole mind control that actually happens in religion. And so I think a lot like for us, like in our region, when people leave the Amish, so to speak, they're like, oh, I'm free and I'm born again. And it's like, you got a whole lot of junk in the trunk yet to detox from. And so going into being free in Christ and being the woman that God has created you to be is actually feels really, really scary because you're coming up against all of those lies and all of the judgments and the criticisms and the shame. And shame is something that is really, really hugely integrated in that religion of, quote unquote, are you good enough? So everything that you do comes from that place. And so for me to be like, oh, well, wait, God wants me to connect to but I can't connect to my heart because my heart deceives me because they really teach, your heart is going to deceive you. And I'm like, so you have the mind war and the heart war. And it's like, oh my gosh, your mind just overtakes you. This big battlefield happening. It's like a hot mess express in a dumpster. And you're trying to blow up the dumpster and walk away. And it's like you're in it yet. And it's just like, coming home and healing your nervous system and coming to your heart is actually when I look back and I'm like, thank goodness that I am stubborn and I am the one that is like, I joke, I'm like, I'm the rebel. I have to challenge things because I wasn't willing to settle. And I was like, honestly, God, if this is what you have for me, I don't know if I want it because I don't know that I can live this way. I can't quote unquote measure up. I can't, like, I'm doing all the mind work, I'm doing all the things. But once I began to really go into my heart, it just life began to feel so good. But I went back and forth. I was scared, and then it was like, okay, but there was always that tug there. And I kept praying. I was like, well, God, if this is what you have for me, if this is the way that you created the woman to be, then why am like I'm so drawn and God is so good, reveals to me, well, you're fighting with your religious thoughts, you're
Yeah.
fighting with your head.
Mm.
This is trust. Like, learn how to trust me. Don't trust men. Trust that what I have for you is greater. And like, as I just healed and I like got rid of those mind chunks and those religious thoughts and the shame and the guilt and um the condemnation and just all of the suppression, I began to realize how my whole body was like this, like crunched together, shut together. And I worked with amazing coaches too. Like she would multiple times be like, put your shoulders back, open your heart up. And I was like, ah, felt like jumping out of a plane, not having a parachute. Like, oh my gosh, am I gonna, you know? And take going from fear to faith. And really, honestly, I said one of the biggest things that I feel like the church, and I would love to hear your insight, doesn't teach on is how for the woman to surrender. Like, because surrender isn't a head thing. And
Yeah.
I was always trying to surrender. trying to surrender. And I always said, I'm just a rebellious child that don't know how to surrender. Well, what was really going on, I didn't have the tools to, like, I was trying to surrender from my head. And like you said, my body didn't feel safe. So my whole body is in fight and flight and is fighting to
Yes.
stay alive. I
Yeah.
don't feel safe to surrender. So that's another huge thing. And surrender shows up in our walk with God. If I say, if you want to know how safe you feel to surrender, look at your relationships around you, because that's also a direct reflection with your relationship with God.
Mm. Mm. So, so good. Oh my goodness, like that piece about trying to surrender with your head. Been there, done that. And so many women that I talk to have always say like, yeah, that was me. That was me. And like I mentioned, I was talking to Leona just before we started to record this episode is the the reason why I started this podcast was because there was so much that I started to learn that was not taught at church. It was not that was not those conversations were not being had. And I realized the importance of it because I didn't know how to live as a woman. And that's not okay. And so, oh, it's just that I know how it feels like when you're trying to surrender with your head. It's that it's crunchy, it's it's contractive, it's dry, it's hard, and you just try really hard. You just put more effort into it, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And oh my goodness. So if there's one thing you're gonna take away from this episode is that you do not surrender with your head. So Leona, tell me, what did it feel like for you when you, for the first time, started to experience surrender in the body and as a whole being?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. Uh, so what it felt like for me, actually, the first time that I surrendered in my body was like releasing everything that I had within inside of myself and having this supernatural peace of like, I don't know what this looks like, God. I don't know what this is going to be, but you got me. And I don't have to, I wasn't in my head. I dropped out of my head, went into my body, and was like, I don't know what it, I don't, I don't even know any of it. I don't know the how. I just know that I get to lean back and I get to trust you. And you get to be the one that leads the way. And there was a tug of war. I surrendered and how I can tell that I'm not surrendering in something is when my body hurts. Like the other week, I had a really bad backache. Well, I've had it for quite some time. And I was like, that is signaling to me. I am not feeling safe in my body to surrender right now. And so we went in and we worked with some of my deep inner beliefs and we dug some of that out and my backache went away. And I didn't know how to surrender that part of me because I didn't know the emotion that was locked. It was from my childhood, but the feeling of surrender is so, I just want everybody to experience it. Like I almost could cry because it's such when you're a woman and you're in your head all the time and you're hardcore going and you're strong and independent. And the best way that I can express it to give somebody a visual is, when you're a child and you have like a big fluffy teddy bear and you just grab a hold of it and it just feels so safe and secure and the whole world falls apart and you just know that everything is taken care of. You can close your eyes and you can take a nap. That is that's the image that came to my mind, but that is how it felt like. And funny story, and there's a joke that I crack all the time. I'm like, Jesus showed us the way. He took naps all the time in the storms of life. And so I now take naps. I was never a nap taker. And so some of my friends are like, yeah, we know when Leona, is surrendering because she's taking naps. But I'm like, honestly, that was another thing that I actually would like to bring out is when I was healing my nervous system and I was leaving the strong, independent woman, and my nervous system finally did learn how to calm. I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. And I was like, I don't like this feeling because I don't feel like I'm a strong woman anymore. I don't like feeling all of my emotions. This feels out of control. It feels backwards. I'm exhausted. I used to get all these things done in one day, and now I feel like I'm getting nothing accomplished. However, thank goodness I kept proceeding, I kept going, and it was just like the undoing of all of that stuff. But as far as like coming home and so it's just the most beautiful way of doing life because when you can learn how to surrender and let everything go, you literally allow God to open the heavens for him to bring to you what is best for you and what you're desiring. And if you're in your head, it's a control thing and we're trying to do it our way instead of what he has for us, which is what we desire in our heart.
Mm. Oh my goodness, like what you just said is so worthy of pointing out that women, when they start to really feel the exhaustion of having run their lives in a certain way, like doing, not being in the body, that there's a story that really that you felt that this resistance, like, yeah, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to feel my emotions. I don't want to feel like I don't want to go there. I'd rather be the strong woman. I think that's so
Mhm.
important to point out because I can just imagine that there are women who they want to try it out, like they want to try out this feminine way of being in a way, and then all those emotions and the exhaustion hits, and they're like, well, there's something wrong. Like, yeah, this doesn't feel good. I'm not okay with this. I It's not worth it. So I just want to feel like the superwoman again. And they go back to living their lives being exhausted, but just, putting up the armor that it doesn't show or that they don't actually feel it truly. And they're acting the part of a superwoman. If someone is going through that right now, what would you like to tell her?
Oh, I love that. I would tell her that if that resistance is coming up, that means you're on the right path. You're on the right journey. And it's going to feel all backwards. It's going to feel flipped upside down. And the resistance is good. Allow yourself to get curious because what the resistance is showing you is the beliefs that you had with inside of yourself. And a lot, and often as women will go into criticism of like I was saying, like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Well, why do I feel like I'm not doing enough? Who decided what is enough? And unpacking and allowing yourself to be curious, because when you allow yourself to be curious, you open yourself up further. And you also release those beliefs that you had. And if you have emotions, allow yourself to feel the emotions. And I always like to say, I think Mel Robbins said this about heart hugs, of like placing your hand over your heart and telling yourself, that God's got me, I'm safe, I'm loved, and it's okay for me to feel angry, sad, bitter, resentment, anger, whatever that is, because you're going to experience all of those things. It is okay for me to feel any and all of this. Where does this come from? And allowing yourself to experience it and explore it without judgment. Allow your inner child, like wonder, to come out and look at it as a brand new playground that you're playing on. And it's a brand new world that you get to explore. And there isn't a right and there isn't a wrong, but just allowing yourself to simply be where you are.
Mm.
Because as women, once we learn to allow our emotion, allow ourselves to connect with our emotions, that's when we really become powerful because we can also not just give that to ourselves, but that flows into our life all around us.
Yeah, exactly. So good. What
Yeah.
would you say? Like, I have this conversation with a lot of women all the time. These women are very conscientious. They're very eager to do the right thing. Um, and they are stuck in this rabbit hole or this sort of hamster wheel of I'm constantly trying to fix myself, but I just feel really frustrated all the time. What's your take on that experience of a woman is like, no, I'm fixing myself. I'm fixing myself. I'm trying to, I'm trying to work on myself all the time, but I'm just really tired. What does she need to hear?
Oh, yeah, that was me. I was addicted to fixing myself, actually. That was a huge addiction that I had. And um, for the woman that is experiencing that, and for what I needed to hear at the time is, hey, right there is the hamster wheel you get to get off of. It's not about fixing yourself. It's not about once you have fixed yourself, then you're going to be lovable, then you're going to be worthy, then you're going to be enough. Where are you feeling like you're not enough, or you're not lovable, or you're not worthy, that you keep feeling the need to fix yourself? Can we take a look at that? And those are usually some very deep core wounds that women carry. And I'm a strong believer you're going to want a mentor, a coach, somebody to walk you through it, because I have that in my life because we can't see those deepest parts of ourselves, and we need that person to hold that place and space for us. But the woman that is needing to fix her is running off of that. That's actually very masculine, like, because it's the doing of the fixing of the, and that shows up in our relationships. That's like perfectionism too, of like, wow, I have to fix myself in order to be enough or worthy or lovable with you. And we have this wall that is up in our relationships that shows up, which is also in a relationship with God. And so I would just say to her, it's okay. It's okay to drop that. It's okay. That's a wall. That's an identity that you've carried. It's going to feel scary, but can we let go of it? Can we look what's behind it to really bring you into a true sense of freedom of being the woman that God has called you to be?
Yeah, so true. I find that there are always some moments in the past, early childhood, where a story was birthed, a story of some innate wrongness that women carry, and this sense and feeling that, yeah, there's something deeply wrong with me, and that is unconsciously being carried around into all the things that we do as an adult. And hence, of course, like, you want to fix yourself because you're always wrong or broken. And that when that heals, when restoration is brought to that deepest part of ourselves, it's so liberating. In terms of, like, I talk about the good girl syndrome a lot because it resonates with my women. Do you feel like it's something that you've experienced? I mean, I'm sure, like, in terms of coming out of religion, coming out of this fear-based relationship with God, but did that play a role in your restoration journey of letting go of this need to be seen and sort of someone um someone seeing you as good and approving of you in that moment, and that being what you need? So what I'm trying to ask is, like, that tendency and need to be seen as good, do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I think so. I think I get what. How did that unfold in my journey of being the good girl and then releasing, quote unquote, the releasing the need to feel seen or approved of, and really trusting and knowing that I am already approved of, and that I
Yes.
am. Is that what you're asking?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I had good girl syndrome to the highest level. It was like, and then it was leaving the religion, but I was also in a marriage that was, it wasn't the whole marriage this way, but the last many years was emotionally abusive. And so I always had this like thought, well, if I fix myself, then it's going to work. And I want to share this because I really, it's my heart for women who are in marriages. I think subconsciously they're not even aware of sometimes, well, if I fix myself, then I'll this, then he will this, and then he will do that. And then when in reality, that is only creating a bigger problem because you end up having like resentment, bitterness, and all the things because it's not getting to the heart of you. But I would always make that this was a common statement that I would make when somebody having the good girl syndrome, often you become very defensive, or I was, anyways, because it was like, oh, well, I'm not good enough for you. The moment somebody said something or shared something, oh, well, okay, let me basically work more, do more, and make sure that you're happy and you have all the things that you need in your life. Because if you have that, then I'm quote unquote the good girl. I'm good enough for you. When I was in my marriage or in relationships or my kids or whatever, like, let me make the world revolve around you. I am basically just this puppet on a string that is doing all the things to make myself look good and be lovable enough. And so there was never really a true connection with those around me. And they wanted to connect with my heart, not with, they were frustrated. I was frustrated. And so for me to really go in and be like, wait, I don't have to perform and be the good girl to be lovable, to be honest, was really, really scary. Really scary. I felt so vulnerable that it it's a journey that, like, how can I say, it's like, okay, you jump off the cliff, you land in the water, and you're like, you learn how to swim, and you're like, okay. And then you go to the higher cliff and you're, because it's in chunks. And it felt so vulnerable for me to allow people to see me for me, even when I quote unquote wasn't the good girl. I didn't have my shit together. I was a mess. I couldn't give them anything. I was simply being me from my heart place. Like, that felt so scary to me. And honestly, I had to have a lot of reassurance that I'm lovable in that. I learned how to ask some of my best friends, can you, like, I need you to like reflect back to me what you're seeing in me. Like, I need reassurance right now. And I learned that in one of the classes that I took to ask, because women aren't taught to ask either, and how often do we want to say, hey, I'm not really feeling the greatest right now. Can you reassure me? Because in where I came from, the religion I was in, it wasn't about what I needed or wanted or desired. That was never a place or space to be expressed. So allowing yourself to reach out and say, I'm not having a good day, or I'm having a really difficult time, or no, I can't do that for you. That's a big one too. That doesn't work for me, or no, I don't feel like hanging out right now because I need rest right now, or I need to go on a walk, or I want to do this. I don't feel up to doing these things. And coming home to what does Leona want? What does she need in this moment? And this is something that I used to say to myself, Leona, if you can learn how to fill your needs and desires, you can show up better for others. Because in the beginning, it was just like, oh my God, like, like I'm failing everybody. And it was like I almost had to, in a reverse psychology, include them in the process so I would get it. But when I began to do that, the authentic version, my authenticity began to come out. And I began to realize and see that not only was I giving myself a gift, but I was giving those around me a gift because they knew then, oh, this is Leona. Like, she's not doing something because she feels obligated. And also, like, I have two daughters. they began to show up differently in their life. They began to become unapologetic about using their voice and what they stand for and what they don't stand for, what they need in their life, what are their desires, becoming unapologetic about, hey, this is what my life looks like. This is what I want. I'm going to cut people out of my life that are not for me. And relationships that they entertained in the past, was it girlfriends or whatever, they began to shift, and because they saw me doing this, and this is also in my clients and my friends. So it it will feel really raw, it will feel really vulnerable, and that's why you're going to want to allow support to come in and have those people. It's okay if it's just two people. Like, I didn't have a big support system, because it's going to feel really raw and real. But having those that love you for you, and you allow your heart to begin to open up for them to see what is actually your deepest desire, is to be seen. We
Yeah.
all want that. It just feels scary when we've never had it.
Mhm. Yes.
So yeah, I almost think I derailed the question, but I think I answered.
Oh, it's so good. And I mean, this question is really deep and there's a lot of layers to it. But I mean, that desire to be seen and heard and witnessed, when you are taught to suppress that, and that is a very core basic human need, but still so many of us grow up learning and knowing all the ways how to suppress it because that is what's demanded of you. It can feel like a completely like unsafe territory to venture into, like you said. And so I love that you emphasize the point about support, allowing support to surround you. um what would you say to a woman who is desiring that, but also at the same time is so very afraid of asking for support because she's always been the strong woman in front of everyone's eyes?
Oh, speaking to my heart, that was me. And you know, I feel like this is going to resonate with some women, because I was always the strong woman. And for me, for me to allow support in, it actually began with somebody who lived across the country. I was, when I kind of like started stepping out into this journey, I was still in my marriage, and I fought at the time. Like, there was this event that was going on. It was in California. And I was like, I knew I had to go. And I didn't feel safe to support, to allow anybody in my life in to help me. I was so shut down. I was so broken down. And I was just like, anybody, I believe that anybody that knew me was going to come against me for what I felt on the inside, because I was in that tango in my marriage of whenever I voiced something, it was wrong. So I didn't feel safe. It didn't matter who was in my life. I was not going to share with you what I was going through. And so I bought this ticket to go to this event in California because I was like, I have to do something different, because I literally felt like I was going to die. Like, I wasn't, but I felt like I was going to die. And um he's like, came against it, and I was just like, I have to do this. I have to do this for myself, and I have to do this for my children. And I went out there and I met my coach. I ended up hiring her because she felt safe, because she was across the world. I didn't know her, which a lot of, I think maybe that's a little bit something that gets people sometimes too, is like, and that's the beauty that I love coaching. And as for you, is any woman can come connect with you across the world, and we can connect just like we are on this podcast. And for me, if you're in a position where you're like, I really want support, I really want to be seen, and I really just want that person to be there for me and give me space, I want to say to her is, give yourself the biggest permission slip that you've ever given yourself, and find somebody that isn't in your vicinity, that isn't in your region, that has no connection with your life even. Yes, you align with them but if you're watching somebody online and they're coaching, and your soul and your heart is tugging towards that person, give yourself the permission to say yes and to reach out to them, because that's actually where your biggest transformations are also going to happen, because they're not emotionally intertwined with your story, your beliefs and all of that, and they shine a whole new light into your world. And it doesn't, I think sometimes we box ourselves in thinking we're looking around us and we're like, okay, who, I don't know who to reach for. It's okay. It's okay if you don't feel like reaching for anybody that's around you. Women, we tend to guilt trip ourselves. You don't have to reach for the best friend, even. Allow yourself to reach for, if it is the coach online, if it is your best friend, beautiful. Whoever that is, but just give yourself the permission to slip and don't limit yourself. Because I was the woman who didn't want anybody she knew. I wanted the woman to be clear across the states, because that way she was not close enough to keep such an eye on me that if she hurt me, I could cut her off. Technically, I could block her, get rid of her, and cut her off. That sounds harsh, but that's where I was at the time. I'm just being real. But so giving yourself that beautiful gift of just allowing yourself to have one person, if that's in your life currently, or if it's clear across the world. If that's what feels safer to you, it will feel scary. That's okay if it feels scary. That means you're about to do something beautiful in your life. But just giving yourself that gift of giving something that you've never had.
Mm. I can definitely vouch for that experience, that it's a transformational one, and I'm sure that you share the experience of this utter joy of helping other women step into truth and liberation and their full radiance. It's one of my greatest pleasures, and I applaud you for doing that, because we need all of the women who are willing to be in the arena for this work, because it's too much for even one woman to be out there and being stuck inside their thought loops, inside their I'm not worthy stories, inside their the life I want is not for me, or it's just, for other people, but it's not for me. I think no woman should be feeling that way, especially if you are a woman of faith. It's just it's a contradiction when you think about it, to be living in faith and yet constantly being in the state of denying everything you desire and the possibility, the faith to have it realized. That was one of my biggest realizations. I don't know how you feel about that, Leona, but I felt like I'd been living in so much this sort of spiritual bypassing, this sort of I believe, but I don't actually believe that things are possible for me. I am a believer, but there are so many things that I don't believe are possible for me. And I'm constantly sort of signing this check of scarcity over every area of my life. What do you feel about that? Does that resonate?
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh my word. Yes. Absolutely spiritual bypassing. And that was where one of my biggest frustrations would sit, because I was like, I'm saying I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm saying these scriptures, but nothing is really happening. And I also felt fake, because I was like, I'm not feeling it. But then it was like, don't go by your feelings. And so there was like this whole like, okay, don't go by your feelings. Don't let your feelings control you. Let me just push through this. But it was like this rigidness. And it was like, I love how you said spiritual bypassing, because it was just like, I'm quote unquote, I'm going to church, I'm reading the Bible, I'm quoting the scriptures, and yet I'm a phony, if I'm going to be honest. I'm not being authentic, because, I just have to believe it and I just have to say it and then it's going to happen. But if I'm being honest and I drop the ball, I don't believe it. And why don't I believe it? Well, because I have a whole I have all these stories that are happening behind here, and my whole body doesn't even feel, which I didn't realize at the time, but we're only suppressing further. We're only disconnecting ourselves further when you're like, well, you just need to believe it, declare it, and then it's going to happen. And it's like, that actually made me go back into doubting myself. And then the struggle, like my whole identity was off of its rocker, because it was just like, well, I think I'm a woman of God, but I don't really think I am a woman of God, because if I was a woman of God, then I would be living this, but I'm not living this. But oh, so I must be doing something wrong. So let's fix this, quote unquote. And let me not go by my feelings, because those are just feelings, and I don't want to be controlled by those, because we were taught not to go by our, but all the while I'm being controlled by my feelings because they're just suppressed. And there's this like whole disconnect. It's like your head is over here and your body's over here, and you're like trying to find your way in your walk with God. And it's just like you bypass everything in your heart and your head and your heart and your body, and you stay in your head. But life is kind of numb and is suppressed, and I'm not experiencing it, and I'm not having joy. I'm not having the fruits of the spirit. I'm not having all these things. And it's this big crossfire. And that's a lot of times when I work with my clients, I'm like, drop the church talk, drop the whole thing of I should. Can we just get real? You're human. Can we just drop in the heart? Can we just say, hey, I even say, like, I shared a very raw, real part of my journey where there was a whole year that I was angry with God. Like, I was viciously angry. I was not sorry about it at the time. But that is, when I went through that, that is where I learned so much about myself and God in that time. Because I like basically put everything, I say I was running from God. I put everything to the side. Not that anybody needs to do this, but I'm just going to share my journey. So, because we struggle, and it's like, I didn't go to church, I didn't read, I didn't do anything. I was just like, God, I can't. Like, my daughter was sick. I was like, I'm angry, I'm mad, because I was so suppressed that all my emotions came out in the crushing of the storm when she was sick. And that is really actually when I got to experience the heart of God and more the heart of who I am. Why are we bypassing stuff? God created us to be humans, not to be machines. I can't absorb the word of God when I am full of all these like traumas and pains and stories and all these things that are within inside of myself. Like, let's let's create places and spaces where we can be real, we can be raw, and we can look at those wounds and those stories that you have. Oh, you're not feeling worthy, and like not just slapping on, well, you are worthy because God created you, and giving them a scripture. Well, what's going on? Let's look at it. Let's dig it out. Let's bring it to the light, and let's help you have transformation. And so, yeah, I'm all for that, because I see a lot of pain actually and hurt caused in the churches with people that they're at a war where they're not understanding, but there's this like whole spiritual bypassing happening.
Yes, exactly. That is just it's such a huge frustration for me as well. And to have realized that, yeah, I was really participating in it, that I was completely blind to the ways that I was constantly denying faith in so many areas of my life, denying my humanity, denying my womanliness, denying my desires, denying what I actually felt, because I shouldn't be feeling that way, because I should not, there's always the should. The should word is overrepresented in the vocabulary of a woman who is still living in that people pleasing paradigm, even because there's a lot of people pleasing there as well. You want to be seen a certain way, but are you really honest about your relationship with God? It's a huge thing. I love how you talked about that. So many incredibly powerful and important points. And if there was one thing that a woman could take away from what we just talked about in terms of spiritual bypass, what would you want it to be? This one takeaway that a listener is going to take away from that.
I would tell her that all of her emotions are welcome. For once she allows all of her emotions, when she allows herself to connect with all of her emotions in her heart, is when she opens the flow to have the faith to receive what God has for her.
Yeah, exactly. So, so good. I could go on and on with this conversation, but to honor your time, we're gonna wrap this up here and maybe do a round 2 at some point, if you're okay with that. But
I would
before you
love that.
before you go, tell me, what do you most cherish about being a woman?
Mm. Ooh, that's a good question. I love your questions. And I love how they weren't like we discussed, our questions weren't planned. So it's like when you ask, that's the beauty because the intuitive answer just comes out. What I cherish the most about a woman, and this is funny saying this coming from I was strong and independent, is the chaos, healthy chaos of being a woman. Like we can be 20 different people in one day, and it is okay. Um, a one moment I might be the businesswoman who is all in her structure, and the next moment I might be the woman who is completely playful and who is just doing her own thing and is just flowing in creativity. And the next moment I'm a mom who is in a deep conversation with my children. In the next moment, I might be sad, and it's all okay, whatever those versions are. But the beauty that we as a woman, that I just get to be all of that and be unapologetic, and it's not dangerous or it's not too much for anybody. And it's all of those beautiful parts and pieces that God has created you to be and has created me to be. And we don't have to box ourselves in. We all have beautiful dynamics about ourselves that we bring to the table.
Mm,
So, yeah.
I love that. Do not box yourself. That's so good, so good, because we tend to want to put ourselves in boxes. Ah, I love it. I love it. So, Leona, tell us where we can find you online. What do you have on offer? Where are all the stuff? You have your podcast. Tell us all about it.
Yes, so I have my podcast. It's called Unchained and Untamed, which I'm on Spotify and Apple. There's several more that I'm on that you can find me. And then Instagram is my favorite place. If I come in and message me, I love connecting on Instagram. That is my fun place. I'm also on Facebook, but my bigger thing is definitely Instagram. And then I have a course, but I'm going to be really honest because that's how I am with it. My heart is working one-on-one with women. I love seeing the transformation that I get. Like I'm a connector. And so while I know some women are like, I just want to do the course because we still want to hide. And that's a beautiful place to be as well. That's I honor wherever you are in your journey. So I have a codependency to confidence course, which you also do get a coaching session with me in that course. I have a freebie, and then I have my one-on-one coaching. That is where my heart place is. 'Cause I just love
Mm,
giving women what I did for so long, and now that I have it, I get to give that away. So
yeah,
yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. I can definitely um, resonate with you on that. One-on-one spaces where magic happens. So go
Yes.
ahead and
Yeah.
check out Leona's links. All of it will be in the show notes below, and you can connect with her, send her a message, tell us what you think about this episode, and we'd love to connect with you. Leona, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time so much. I don't take it for granted that you spend this time with me. It was an absolute joy, and I hope that we get to do this again.